Tonight we begin with the economic equivalent of a nuclear bomb. Not an explosion, not a mushroom cloud, but a decision that will be felt in every gas station, every grocery store, every factory, and every home on Earth. Iran has closed the Strait of Hormuz, the narrow waterway through which 21% of the world's oil flows. Every single day. The choke point that energy analysts have called the jugular vein of the global economy. The passage that, as of 0400 local time, no longer exists for international shipping. This closure came less than 48 hours after American cruise missiles devastated Bandar Abbas, Iran's largest port and primary naval facility. Washington called it a precision strike on military infrastructure. Tehran called it an act of war, and now Iran has responded with the weapon they have threatened to use for decades, the complete shutdown of the world's most critical maritime passage. 17 million barrels of oil pass through the Strait of Hormuz every day. As of this morning, 0 barrels are passing. Oil prices have already exceeded $300 per barrel and trading has been suspended to prevent total market collapse. The global economy is entering uncharted territory, and the question on every analyst's mind is simple: what happens next? For decades now, there had been warnings not from fringe analysts, not from alarmist commentators, just warnings that any serious conflict with Iran would eventually reach this choke point. The threat had followed a certain pattern, a rhythm, almost a doctrine of deterrence. Iranian officials would periodically declare that if Iran cannot export oil, no one will export oil through the strait. Western analysts would debate whether Iran could actually close the passage. Military planners would game scenarios, and then tensions would ease, and the warnings would fade. But what set off the current crisis, what transformed decades of threats into reality, was the American strike on Bandar Abbas 72 hours ago. Intelligence analysts who monitor the conflict know what triggered the closure. American missiles struck Bandar Abbas with devastating precision. The port's primary naval facility was destroyed. 3 Revolutionary Guard frigates were sunk at their moorings. Fuel storage facilities burned for 2 days. An estimated 400 Iranian military personnel were killed. The economic damage exceeded $8 billion. Iran had promised retaliation. Iran had promised that American aggression would be answered. Iran had promised that the cost would be global. Now that promise is being kept, and the cost is already beyond calculation. At 4 p.m. local time, commercial vessels transiting the Strait of Hormuz began receiving emergency broadcasts on all maritime frequencies. The message was transmitted in English, Arabic, Farsi, and Chinese. Attention all vessels. By order of the Islamic Republic of Iran, the Strait of Hormuz is closed to all international shipping. Effective immediately. Any vessel attempting transit will be subject to interdiction, boarding, and seizure. This closure will remain in effect until further notice. All vessels currently in the strait are ordered to halt immediately and await inspection. Any vessel that fails to comply will be considered hostile and engaged with military force. Within minutes, chaos erupted across the shipping industry. Over 60 commercial vessels were transiting or preparing to transit the strait at the moment of the announcement. 37 of those vessels were oil tankers carrying a combined cargo of over 22 million barrels of crude oil. Ship captains faced an impossible choice: continue transit and risk seizure, or attack, halt and await Iranian boarding, or attempt to reverse course and flee to international waters. Most chose to halt. Within 3 hours, Iranian Revolutionary Guard naval forces, fast attack boats, frigates, and helicopters had surrounded the stationary vessels. By 0800, Iranian boarding parties were on the decks of 12 tankers. The crews, representing over 15 nationalities, were detained. The vessels were ordered to proceed to Iranian waters for inspection. The world's oil supply had become hostage, but the physical seizure of vessels was only half of the Iranian action. The other half was invisible but far more dangerous. Iranian mine-laying submarines, operating in darkness before dawn, deployed an estimated 300 naval mines across the strait's shipping lanes. The mines were a mixture of types: contact mines that detonate when struck, influence mines that respond to the magnetic signature of passing vessels, and sophisticated smart mines that can distinguish between targets and remain dormant until the right vessel passes. The minefield was designed not to sink ships immediately, though. That would certainly occur, but to create uncertainty. No captain could know whether the next meter of water contained death. No shipping company could risk billion-dollar vessels and irreplaceable crews. The strait wasn't just blockaded, it was poisoned, and cleaning it even after the political situation resolved would take months. The response from Washington came within hours. It was not diplomatic, it was not measured, it was a declaration of war in all but name. The Secretary of Defense appeared at the Pentagon briefing room with an expression of controlled fury. The Iranian regime's closure of the Strait of Hormuz is an act of war against the international community. It is an attack on the global economy. It is economic terrorism on a scale never before attempted, he continued. The United States will not accept this closure. American naval forces are being deployed to reopen the strait by force if necessary. We call on our allies and partners to join us in this essential mission. Freedom of navigation is not negotiable. And he concluded, let me be clear to the Iranian leadership. Every hour the strait remains closed, the consequences for your regime grow more severe. You have 48 hours to reverse this decision. If you do not, the United States will take whatever action is necessary to restore international shipping, and that action will be devastating. 48 hours. In ultimatum. A deadline for Iran to reverse the most significant economic weapon it has ever deployed. No one expected Iran to comply, and Iran did not disappoint. Within 4 hours of the American ultimatum, Supreme Leader Khamenei appeared on Iranian state television. His tone was defiant, almost triumphant. The American enemy has destroyed our ports, they have murdered our sailors, they have declared war on the Islamic Republic. Now they demand that we allow them to continue transporting oil through our waters, oil that funds their aggression, oil that enables their crimes. He continued, the Strait of Hormuz belongs to the nations of the Persian Gulf. It does not belong to America. If America wants to fight for it, we are ready. For every American sailor who dies in these waters, we will consider it justice for the sailors they murdered at Bandar Abbas. And he concluded, the strait will remain closed until America withdraws from our region, not 48 hours, forever, or until they leave. The ultimatum was rejected, the closure was confirmed, and the countdown to military confrontation had begun. Tonight, as naval forces converge on the world's most critical choke point, analysts are assessing what a military reopening of the strait would actually require, and the assessments are sobering. The geography. The Strait of Hormuz is approximately 33 kilometers wide at its narrowest point, but the shipping lanes are far narrower, approximately 10 kilometers wide, divided into 2-mile-wide inbound and outbound channels with a 2-mile buffer zone. The northern shore, the Iranian side, features mountainous terrain perfect for concealing anti-ship missile batteries. The southern shore, the Way and Omani side, offers limited military utility without extensive preparation. The depth of the strait varies from approximately 60 to 90 meters, deep enough for submarines but shallow enough for mine warfare. This geography heavily favors the defender. Iran has spent decades preparing to fight. In these waters, America is arriving as the challenger, the mines. The most immediate threat is the minefield Iran has deployed. Mine clearance operations known as mine countermeasures are among the most dangerous and time-consuming naval activities. The U.S. Navy operates approximately 11 mine countermeasures vessels globally. Only 4 are currently deployed to the 5th Fleet area of responsibility. Under combat conditions with Iranian forces actively opposing clearance operations, experts estimate that clearing the Strait's shipping lanes could take 6 to 12 months. Every day of delay costs the global economy billions of dollars. Every mine cleared risks American lives, and Iran can lay new mines faster than America can clear them. The anti-ship missiles. Iran has deployed hundreds of anti-ship missiles along its coastline overlooking the strait. The Noor, Gator, College Fars, and other systems can reach targets throughout the passage. Many are mobile, launched from trucks that can relocate within minutes of firing. Destroying these batteries requires extensive airstrikes deep into Iranian territory, a massive escalation from current operations. And even after strikes, Iran possesses enough missiles that some would survive to threaten naval operations. The fast attack boats. The Revolutionary Guard Navy operates hundreds of small, fast boats designed specifically for strait operations. These vessels carry rockets, missiles, and torpedoes. In swarm attacks, they can overwhelm the defenses of larger warships. American forces can destroy many of them, but not without taking casualties. The submarines: Iran operates 3-kilo-class diesel submarines and approximately 20 midget submarines. In the confined, acoustically challenging waters of the Strait, detecting these vessels is extraordinarily difficult. A single torpedo hit on an American destroyer or cruiser would be catastrophic. A hit on a carrier would be unthinkable. The bottom line: reopening the Strait by force is possible. American military power is overwhelming, but the cost would be significant in ships damaged or sunk, in sailors killed, in time required, and while that cost is being paid, the global economy burns. And here's where the story becomes even more alarming. The closure of the Strait of Hormuz is not just a military problem, it's an economic weapon of mass destruction. Let me explain what happens to the global economy when 21% of the world's oil supply disappears overnight. Immediate price impact. Oil prices have already exceeded $300 per barrel, triple the pre-crisis level. Trading has been suspended on major exchanges to prevent complete market collapse. When trading resumes, prices could spike further, possibly to $400 or beyond. There is no modern precedent for this. Scenario: fuel availability. Strategic petroleum reserves exist in consuming nations: the U.S. Strategic Petroleum Reserve, European reserves, Chinese stockpiles, but these reserves are designed for short-term disruptions, weeks, not months. If the closure persists beyond 60 days, rationing will become necessary in most developed economies. Gas lines, fuel allocation, restricted driving. Scenes not witnessed since the 1973 oil crisis, but on a far larger scale. Supply chain collapse. Modern economies run on just-in-time logistics. Trucks that deliver food to grocery stores need diesel. Ships that transport goods from Asia need bunker fuel. Factories that manufacture products need energy. When fuel becomes scarce and expensive, every supply chain fails simultaneously. Food prices spike, goods become unavailable, inflation explodes, economic recession. Every major oil price shock in history has triggered recession. The Strait closure is a larger shock than any of those events. Economists are using words like depression and collapse, words not typically applied to developed economies. Political consequences. Governments that cannot provide fuel to their citizens face political crisis. Protests, civil unrest, electoral upheaval. Leaders will face enormous pressure to do something, but options are limited. The economic weapon Iran has deployed may be more devastating than any military strike could ever be. As the crisis enters its second day, the global response is becoming clear. American military deployment. The USS Gerald R. Ford and USS Dwight D. Eisenhower carrier strike groups are converging on the Gulf of Oman. Additional guided missile destroyers and cruisers are en route from the Mediterranean and Pacific. Mine countermeasures vessels are being deployed from Bahrain and Japan. B-52 and B-2 bombers have been placed on alert at Diego Garcia and in the continental United States. Marine amphibious forces are preparing for potential operations. Iranian military posture. Revolutionary Guard naval forces have dispersed from ports, making targeting difficult. Mobile missile launchers have relocated to concealed positions. Air defense systems are on maximum alert. Submarine forces are believed to be deployed throughout the Strait area. Ground forces have reinforced coastal positions overlooking the shipping lanes. Allied positions. The United Kingdom has pledged naval support for mine clearance and escort operations. France has offered naval assets and expressed solidarity with American objectives. Saudi Arabia and the UAE have offered basing and logistical support. Japan has declared the closure unacceptable but has not committed military forces. South Korea has expressed grave concern and is consulting on response options. India, a major importer of Gulf oil, is maintaining studied neutrality. Chinese position. China, which imports more oil through the strait than any other nation, has issued a carefully worded statement. China calls for restraint by all parties and opposes unilateral military action. The Strait of Hormuz is an international waterway that should remain open to navigation. China is prepared to facilitate diplomatic resolution of this crisis. The statement notably does not condemn Iran. The statement notably does not support American military action. China is positioning itself as a potential mediator while its economy suffers from the same oil shortage affecting the West. Russian position. Russia, as an oil exporter that benefits from high prices, has taken a different approach. The closure of the strait is a direct consequence of American aggression against Iran. Russia calls on the United States to cease military operations and engage in dialogue. Military escalation will not resolve this crisis. Russia is providing diplomatic cover for Iran while enjoying windfall profits from oil prices that have tripled. Remember, the world has feared this scenario for decades. Every American war game involving Iran has included strait closure as a key Iranian response. Every energy security analysis has identified Hormuz as the single greatest vulnerability in global oil supply. Every military planner has known that the strait cannot be kept open by force without significant cost. And yet, the assumption was always that Iran would not actually close it. The assumption was that Iran needed oil revenue too much to close the strait. The assumption was that Iranian leaders were rational actors who understood that strait closure would hurt them as much as anyone. Those assumptions have been proven wrong. The attack on Bandar Abbas changed the calculation. When Irani's primary port was destroyed, when 400 of their sailors were killed, the economic calculation became secondary. This is no longer about oil revenue. This is about revenge. This is about demonstrating that attacking Iran has consequences. This is about proving that the world cannot ignore Iranian interests. And this is about showing that American military power, for all its overwhelming capability, cannot prevent Iran from imposing costs on the entire world. The assumption of rational economic calculation failed because it ignored the role of honor, anger, and national pride. Iran is willing to suffer economically if it means making America and the world suffer more. That calculation may be irrational by Western standards, but it is the calculation that has been made, and the world is now living with the consequences. What makes this moment so volatile is that every major actor faces pressures that complicate resolution. In Tehran, the regime has made a dramatic statement of power and defiance. Backing down now, reopening the strait without significant American concessions would humiliate the leadership and suggest the closure was a bluff. The pressure is to maintain the closure regardless of cost. The Revolutionary Guards, who control the naval forces implementing the blockade, have staked their institutional credibility on success. In Washington, the administration has issued an ultimatum with a 48-hour deadline. That deadline is approaching. If it passes without action, American credibility collapses. But military action to reopen the strait will be costly, time-consuming, and uncertain. The pressure is to act, but action has consequences that are difficult to control. In global capitals, leaders of oil-importing nations face desperate populations watching fuel prices double and triple. They need the strait reopened immediately, but they fear that American military action could extend the crisis rather than resolve it. The pressure is for diplomatic solution, but Iran is not offering one. In energy markets, traders and analysts are pricing in scenarios that range from catastrophic to apocalyptic. Every hour of closure increases economic damage. The pressure for resolution is overwhelming, but the path to resolution is unclear. For ordinary citizens, people around the world are watching fuel prices spike, wondering if they can afford to drive to work, heat their homes, or buy food at rapidly inflating prices. They don't care about geopolitics, they care about survival. The pressure on governments to end this crisis is immense and growing. Every pressure point is active, every actor is constrained, and the clock is ticking toward the American deadline. The White House statement, released as the deadline approaches, attempted to maintain pressure while leaving room for negotiation. The president said, "The Iranian regime's closure of the Strait of Hormuz is unacceptable. It is an attack on every nation that depends on energy supplies from the Gulf. It cannot be allowed to stand," he continued. "We have given Iran 48 hours to reverse this decision. That deadline is approaching. If the strait is not reopened, the United States and our allies will take action to restore freedom of navigation." And he concluded, "Even now, we remain open to diplomatic resolution. If Iran contacts us with a serious proposal, we are prepared to listen. But absent such a proposal, military action will proceed." The statement was carefully calibrated. It maintained the ultimatum. It promised action, but it also left it or opened a door Iran has shown no interest in walking through. Iran's response came through the foreign ministry. American ultimatums are meaningless to a nation that has resisted American aggression for 45 years. The strait will be reopened when American forces leave our region and compensation is paid for the criminal attack on Bandar Abbas. Until then, not one drop of oil will flow. The positions are irreconcilable. The deadline is approaching, and the world is holding its breath. Supreme Leader Khamenei's address to the nation delivered as the American deadline approaches was designed to prepare Iran for what comes next. He said, "Tomorrow, America says it will attack us to reopen the strait. Let them come. We have prepared for this day for 45 years. Every kilometer of these waters is a death trap for the enemy." He said, "They think their aircraft carriers make them invincible. They will learn that our missiles, our mines, our small boats, our submarines, they are the masters of these waters, not American admirals." And he said, "To every Iranian, be proud. Today, your nation has brought the world superpower to its knees. They cannot move a barrel of oil without our permission. For all their weapons, for all their threats, they are helpless before Iranian resolve." The speech was followed by military footage, missiles launching, boats swarming, mines deploying. The message was unmistakable. Iran is not backing down. Iran is ready for war, and Iran believes it can win not by defeating American forces militarily, but by making the cost of victory unacceptable. Here's what makes the coming hours so dangerous. The strait closure is not Iran's only weapon. If American forces attempt to reopen the passage, Iran has promised to expand the conflict. Hezbollah activation. Hassan Nasrallah has declared that any American attack to reopen the strait will be treated as an attack on the entire resistance axis. Hezbollah's 150,000 rockets and missiles could devastate Israeli cities within hours. A northern front would stretch Israeli defenses and complicate American operations. Houthi escalation. Yemenis Iran-backed forces have announced that the Bab el-Mandeb Strait will share the fate of Hormuz. Closure of the southern entrance to the Red Sea would compound the energy crisis catastrophically. Shipping routes would be disrupted across two critical choke points simultaneously. Attacks on Gulf infrastructure. Iranian missiles can reach oil facilities throughout Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Kuwait, and Qatar. Attacks on refineries, loading terminals, and processing facilities could extend the oil shortage even if the strait is reopened. The damage would take years to repair. Terrorist operations. Iranian sleeper cells in Western countries may be activated. Attacks on energy infrastructure in consuming nations would compound the crisis. The conflict could reach American and European soil. Asymmetric warfare. Even if American forces successfully clear the strait, Iran can continue to make it unusable.